The surpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it, here, receive, and uphold it, vow to fathom it, the true meaning, to liberate all beings. Let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let us begin our class on the wish-fulfilling treasury, composed by Venerable Longchenpa. Currently, we are studying on if one practitioner were to practice the Dharma that would lead to nirvana, then one should practice the listening, contemplation, and the actual practice of the Dharma. And currently we're talking about the listening. In terms of from whom you should study the Dharma, then we need to first discern what makes a qualified teacher from the disqualified teacher. And then in terms of how to listen, then we talked about the teacher themselves, and then on the 11th chapter we are studying the audience, and then the teachers. Within the teachers chapter, there are the teachers that gives the teaching, and then how to give the teaching, and then within the how to give the teachings, there is the discussion on why one should give the teaching through the systematic method. First of all, we discuss the importance of systematic teaching, and then we are going to look at the faults associated with not giving the teaching in a systematic manner. Previously, we have already studied the 9 potential issues with not giving teachings in a systematical way. First, it would lead to the loss of the key instructions of Buddhism, and then the ones with the shallow wisdom would easily generate a wrong view and not attaining enlightenment as a result, and so on and so forth. There are 9 key issues that's been addressed from last class. And today we will continue to look at a few more questions, a few more issues. In terms of the step-by-step fashion of the systematical education, you need to start from the easy, then to the profound. But some people may feel that I am of the sharpest capacity. Why don't you give me teachings of the most profound teachings? But within a large group of audience, it is only very few number of people can be considered as the sharp facultied ones. So in general, let it be the education domestically or abroad, in order to provide the teaching to the majority of people, to 99% of the people in elementary school, middle school, or in university, all of those kinds of steps are followed, because this kinds of system would be fitting to the majority of people. It is not to say that your particular step of learning is wrong. It is not to say that, you should study university curriculum and then look at the elementary and the middle school. But not many people would go through that particular method. Similarly, Buddhism would also take this particular approach, and it is reasonable to take this step-by-step approach. If you were to receive those profound and subtle and vast teachings at the very first, there could be the potential damage to the vessel, to receive Dharma, and would not lead to success. The verse states, grasp onto emptiness leads to lower realms, claims to be aimless but only concerns with the worldly. Revealing secrets to the unripened practitioners, there are exceeding numbers of faults associated with not following systematic approach. I think the teachings given by Venerable Longchenpa is really wonderful. Not sure if you feel the same as me, but after studying the wish-fulfilling treasury, lots of the teachings that brother feels quite difficult to understand or considered as difficult to understand in a worldly sense can truly be answered by Longchenpa's explanations. Now that I have translated this teaching, though you may not feel the precious though you may not understand how precious it is, but later maybe there will be people understand the value of this particular teaching. Anyhow, over here it talks about if one were not to give teachings systematically, but to give teachings at first on how all phenomena is empty, then it could lead to people's grasping towards emptiness. That is dangerous, since it could abrupt one's systematic path of progression on the Dharma teachings, because one first should study the virtuous seeds would lead to the fruition of virtue, and vice would lead to vice. All of those kinds of step-by-step teachings is quite crucial. If you were to abandon it, the view can be extremely dangerous, because that means you have produced the grasping towards emptiness, and such kinds of grasping cannot be saved by any kinds of medicine. It is said in the Madhyamika Karika, if one were to hold on to emptiness, the Buddhas can't even liberate them, as this particular view is detrimental. And according to the 400 verses of Madhyamika, also pointed out that to the foolish ones that holds on to the view of self, one should not give them teachings of no self, because they would not be able to accept such teaching that everything is empty. And then eventually such kind of teaching would lead them to fall into the three lower realms. It is only a very small number of noble ones, after receiving the teaching of selflessness, they could tread onto the path towards nirvana. But a majority of them, if you were to give them teachings on emptiness, it can be dangerous. And for those kinds of people, after holding onto emptiness, they would say that, oh, everything is space, it is nothing is existent. In such a way, how would they believe in that virtue, which then result in virtue and vice to vice? Nor would they generate any faith to the three jewels. At the end, they would rather abide in a very worldly state. Sometimes we would call the crazy wisdom or crazy meditation, where the practitioner doesn't need to do anything because they're abiding at this aimless and wishless state. However, those people who are abiding at a mundane state, a worldly state, then they would feel that killing and stealing, sexual misconduct and lying is nothing. So the only thing they stopped doing is the virtuous deeds, such as making offering of the lamps or circumambulating and so on and so forth. At the end, they would only have the worldly body, speech, and mind. In that state, if one were to die, the accumulated negative deeds could lead to quite detrimental rebirth in the later lifetimes, and one would have squandered one's lifetime. That would be quite pitiful. So we shouldn't hastily to describe the most profundity of the Dharma to others right away, because if the sentient beings were not matured in their mind stream, and if we were to give them teachings of the most profound teachings or of Vajrayana teachings, then you could potentially violate the seventh root vow of Vajrayana. On top of that, you would destroy the continuum of the others. According to many of the sutras, for example, the Great Jewel Heap Sutra states that there are the kinds of people that do not pay great attention to causes and fruition. They would even disdain causes and fruition, disdain karma. Such kinds of bhikshus that has excessive arrogance are usually described by the metaphor of a foolish goat. So in many of the sutra teachings, it states that one would rather have the view of an existence of self as big as Mount Sumeru. One should not have the view of emptiness. Why is that? It is that if you were to have the view of emptiness, then such kind of person cannot study the Avatamsaka. So that is the description of it. Lots of the teachings, let's say the emptiness or the most profundity of the Vajrayana teachings, cannot be expounded in front of a non-Dharma vessel. if one had already received it, then of course if one were to be ready to receive such teachings, of course you could. But usually we're talking about the Vajrayana teachings needs preliminary practices. Without the preliminary practices, one probably is not ready. So after the 50,000 of preliminary teachings, at least one would start practicing refuge vows, and then the bodhicitta, and then accumulation of merit, as well as confession liturgy and Guru Yoga. By such kind of a step-by-step method, one would have this solid foundation. According to the 10 Wheels Kshitigarbha Sutra, there are some teachings similar to that particular one, where it talks about the connection of the Shravakayana to the Mahayana, and talks about how if one were to have the capacity to receive Shravakayana's teachings, but if you were to give them the Mahayana teachings, there could be lots of faults that's associated with it. For such reason, we need to adopt a methodical approach in the Dharma teachings to avoid all kinds of faults that could be associated with not giving teachings in a systematical way. According to the Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra, it states, if all the phenomena were to be existent originally, however, by practicing on the path, you are taught that they're empty, then it is something to be fearful about. However, everything, all phenomena, are empty at the beginning. For such reason, one should not be terrified of emptiness. But the sentient beings are terrified because of the false perceptions. In order to eradicate those kinds of false perceptions and the conceptual mind, then the teachings should be taught. This has been taught by the Buddha to Shukri in their conversation. The Buddha states that, well, why are you terrified of emptiness? When I expounded the teachings of all phenomena are empty, if you were to be terrified of emptiness, because all phenomena were existent at the beginning, but after studying it, they become empty, then you should be terrified. However, it is that all phenomena were empty at the beginning. For such reason, you really shouldn't be terrified. But there are the inferior practitioners, the kinds of people whom do not have a solid foundation and do not have the matured and ripened capacity to receive such teachings. Therefore, the Buddha would give teachings in a systematic way. Through such methods, then the disciples would be able to receive the teachings, just as how the children would change the foods they can consume through the changes of their age and through their growth. In the West, I know people really enjoy the Mahayati teachings, and some teachers would bestow the Mahayati teachings to the disciples without empowerments and do not give them teachings on the preliminary practices, because apparently they don't appreciate the preliminary practices and they only want to receive the direct pointing out. Other than the very few of the sharp facultied disciples, not many people would be benefited from such Mahayati teachings. So in order to benefit the great numbers of the audience, we need to give teachings in a step-by-step manner, so that their mind stream can accustom to the Dharma and slowly tread on the path. By now, we've completed on the faults of not following a systematic approach of the Dharma teaching. Let's look at the next textual outline, where it talks about what kinds of Dharma that we should give to the sentient beings. And then it has a general explanation and explicit explanation. The first one talks about according to Mipa Rinpoche's textual outline, the general explanation, saying that what kind of Dharma that you should give to the sentient beings. Since we've already discussed that and come to the conclusion that the systematic Dharma teaching is essential. So what is considered as a systematic Dharma teaching then? It is firstly to give the teaching on how to make choices of what to accept and what to abandon on the path of liberation, so that they can know that there is a Dharma that they can choose. And then to be more specific, what is that kind of Dharma that one should know, one should study? Over here it talks about the various kinds of yanas, the vehicles, which is of the unfathomable numbers of the yanas. That includes all of the Dharma that can be included in the samsara and nirvana. So the yana that includes the Mahayana, Hinayana, the common yana, and the uncommon yana, according to the Vidya Nirdesa Shastra, I think composed by Vasubandhu, he described the 10 types of dharmas. When I first came here, we had to memorize the 10 types of dharmas, because whenever we refer to the term, we refer to the dharma. By using the term dharma, there are different dharmas. For example, sometimes we would call all the phenomena as dharma, sometimes we call the path as dharma, sometimes we call the nirvana as dharma, the objects of consciousness as dharma, sometimes the dharma books and dharma texts, and all the dharma of the future, because the word dharma in Sanskrit has the meaning of upholding. Since it is upholding, it is all pervasive. It can include a great numbers of concepts. Whenever we search for the dharma, then we need to specify what is that dharma we need to search. We need to seek. Is it of the dharma of samsara or of nirvana? Is it pure or is it defiled dharma? Is it a worldly dharma? Is it transmundane dharma? There are so much definitions of dharma, and that is because the dharma could include great numbers of concepts and the specific meanings of it. And over here, the dharma that we're referring to is the dharma that we need to part ways, which is the dharma of samsara, and then the kind of dharma that we need to attain, which is the nirvana dharma. In order to explain that, then one has to understand the differences of yanas. There is Mahayana, Hinayana. The yana that needs to be abandoned and yana needs to be accepted, as well as the knowledge and dharma that needs to be abandoned and accepted as well. Whenever we talk about dharma, we're talking about that. Are you giving the dharma teaching of the worldly or of samsaric or of nirvana? So we need to understand what to accept and what to abandon. Are you here to listen to the dharma that would lead you to the truth? Are you here to enjoy the dharma? Are you here to breathe the fresh air? Are you here to eat tsampa and ghee? Are you here to just have the silverweed roots or other purposes? That is not true. Our purpose of being here is to seek the Dharma teaching. At the same time, we probably can enjoy some tsampa. At the time of seeking and studying the Dharma to enjoy Tsampa, then Tsampa is also Dharma, because if I were to enjoy the Tsampa, it will transform from the Dharma of samsara into the Dharma that leads to nirvana. This is the general explanation. Now let's look at the explicit explanation. For the beginners, one should expound on the teachings of karma. For the ones that enters the path, then one should expound the teachings on the differences of yanas. In order to benefit the others, for the beings that would benefit the others, then one should expound the teachings of the 5 Vidyas, the 5 sciences. Whenever we are about to give teachings to the others, there are the three types of audience. The first one is the beginner. In terms of giving the teachings to the beginners, what kind of yana should we present to them? In front of the beginners, we should expound the teachings such as the meritorious qualities of liberation, the faults that's associated with samsara, the human life is precious, and then the human life is impermanent, as well as the karmic causes and fruitions, and the preliminary practices. According to the Ranakutta Sutra, it states that in order to lead the ones onto the path of liberation, one should give the teachings accordingly. So to the beginners, according to some sutras, it states or describes the beginners as the newly aspired bodhisattvas, the ones that just made the aspiration. So in front of these newly aspired practitioners and bodhisattvas, we should give them teachings on the precious of human life, and then study the preliminary practices, and then the words of my perfect teacher, and the Bodhisattva Charavatara. These are really important foundations. After studying these, especially the words of my perfect teacher, you would understand the step-by-step system of Buddhism, and then you can give teachings also on the karmic causes and fruitions, such as the 100 karmic stories, as well as the Sutra of Vice and Fool, so on and so forth. So that's the first one. And then for the second category of the audience, that is the ones that has already tread onto the path, the ones that enter the path, there are the ones that entered into the Sutrayana path, into the path of accumulation, the path of joining, or the ones that enters into the path of Vajrayana, or into the Hinayana, or into the Mahayana, so on and so forth. All of those kinds of people that has already entered into the path, then you should give them teachings according to the path that they had already entered, or the yana they had already entered. For example, if one were to particularly enjoy the teachings from the Hinayana, then you should give them teachings on the Four Mindfulness. And then if you were to give teachings to the one that enters into the path of Mahayana, then you can give teachings on the 6 paramitas. So it really very much depends on whatever kind of path they already have entered. For the kind of practitioners that enjoys and have the aspiration to benefit the others, then you should give them teachings on the 5 Vidyas, the 5 sciences. As it is important for them to understand the different traits and skills and sciences in order to benefit the others, so they should study from that particular perspective. According to the ornaments of the Mahayana Sutra Shastra, it states that if one were not to diligently study the 5 Vidyas, even the great noble one would not be able to attain full Buddhahood. So in order to benefit and magnetize the others, one should study diligently on the knowledge that is all-pervading. If you do not study diligently of the 5 Vidyas, then how could you attain the fruition of Buddhahood that is all-pervasive? People used to ask, why is Larungar called the 5 Sciences Buddhist Academy of Larungar? And people don't really know what the 5 sciences are. It is the science of linguistics, of the Buddhist logic, of the arts and crafts and engineering, also the inner sciences.
这些的话呢，现在就是我们藏族这边的话呢，基本上是
Currently, in the Tibetan sector, we do have a class to each of those sciences, but right now we don't have many that is currently studying the linguistics, because the linguistics mostly study Sanskrits, and we don't really have too many studying the Sanskrits. In the past, there were many that studied the Sanskrits. And in terms of the sciences of medicine, usually we have lots of Western doctors and Chinese doctors over here, but not many of the Tibetan doctors. In the morning, we had a meeting on how to promote the studies of the Tibetan science of medicine. The Jumos, the nuns, the Tibetan nuns section, there are about almost 30 people that's studying the Tibetan medicine, and then same as the Lama's sides. Though not many people are currently studying the science of the Tibetan medicine, but all of those who are enrolled in that program or researching those programs have studied medicine for 10 or 20 years. So let's look at how to further promote the studies of the science of medicine. At first, when Pontsuk Rinpoche started to name this institute as the Five Sciences, his intention was to provide the opportunity to the practitioners to adapt into different fields of studies, so that the practitioners can attain the omniscient Buddhahood. This is the profundity of him starting this Five Sciences Institute. On the other hand, in order to benefit sentient beings in this world, we do need to study various kinds of knowledge and sciences to benefit them. For example, we study the science of medicine. Also, we study design, architecture, and different kinds of technology. It is crucial for us to study the renewed technology and follow the steps of this era, because if we were to simply lock ourselves up in our retreat huts, of course this is encouraged. If you can study in retreat huts at all times, that's really wonderful. But if another group of us do not get in touch with the newly advanced technology, then we could get eliminated by this ever-advancing society. That is why that the young people and those of you who have lots of studies and technology and the ability to study those kinds of sciences, so that we can use them to first of all lead us to liberation, and then to benefit sentient beings, and to follow up with the advancement of this society and time, we need to study the Five Sciences. On top of that, we need to give the teachings of the profound and vast Dharma teachings to those practitioners. So what we need to do is to give the different teachings to the different capacity practitioners, the ones with the different capacity to receive the Dharma. According to the Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra, it states that to observe the disposition of the sentient beings, and that is to make the observation of the grandness of their afflictions, also the sharpness of their wisdom. I think the Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra is really wonderful teaching. There are lots of wonderful teachings that's included. In the past few years, I've been translating the Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra into Tibetan language, but I couldn't continue the project whenever I travel back to Larungar. Sometimes I feel that the Tibetans seems like they don't really lack any of those literal translations anyways. The great Tibetan Tripitaka is currently lying in the libraries with dusts covering them. So it seems that maybe translation is not really meaningful. I might as well just translate the Tibetan language into the Chinese, and I probably have more readers out of freshness. Anyhow, the Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra indeed included great teachings over there. When we get back to the actual teaching here, it then states how to give teachings. Our Dharma teachers over here has to pay attention. We have lots of the future Dharma teachers currently who may appear to be quite insignificant. They may not be even a mentor or a tutor right now. But in the future, they may become a great Dharma teacher that has thousands and tens of thousands of disciples. Hopefully, they will maintain who they are as now. Hopefully, they would maintain their humility and still remain their respect and being quite humble. Of course, there are the kind of so-called great Dharma teachers. After having thousands of disciples, their demeanor completely transformed all the way from the humble kinds of teacher that they used to be. They started getting quite arrogant, and then they would gain weight. The way they walk, the way they talk, the way they eat is completely different. The way they dress up is very different. They would say that, oh, I've been talking over a project with the government, and initially I really didn't want to get involved, but I was requested by and so very successful person, and then I was encouraged and persuaded to do this. I'm not sure if he would transform me into that kind of person. Anyhow, I really hope that we can be rather quite grounded and be whomsoever you are instead of holding up those kinds of demeanors. Majority of our Dharma teachers are quite good. The Khenpos and Khenmos, whenever they have the opportunity to give the Dharma teachings, I think the Khenpos and Khenmos from here usually don't have that much of arrogance. Because arrogance is something, though it's insubstantial, but you can definitely see it on people's actions and on their facial expressions. For the Dharma teachers over here, the ones that's been cultivated in this Dharma Institute, majority of you are quite faithful, and usually their activities and actions are quite similar. Now, the next one is to talk about the obscurations and obstacles from being a Dharma teacher. It talks about how, as a Dharma teacher, should eradicate the kinds of obstacles in order to give Dharma teachings. What are the obstacles? I think over here the obstacles are not just associated to the Dharma teachers, but to the audience as well. Firstly, we need to make sure that we can get away from the distractions and not be fettered by benefits and offerings. If you were to get really distracted every day and being fettered by all kinds of chores or being fettered by all kinds of interpersonal relationships, then it could distract you a lot from the actual Dharma. On top of that, if you were to receive grand numbers of offerings and benefits, as a true Dharma teacher, I think it could be distracting. A true Dharma teacher would be better to lead a simple life. Just a few days ago, we were in Dharma retreat, and initially I thought I would be okay to have tsampa every day for every meal, but I really couldn't get used to that meal structure anymore without any vegetables. But luckily I found this cabbage. So this one cabbage lasted me for 15 days. I would eat a little bit every day, and that was quite wonderful. Maybe because of the time change, maybe because of the society's changes, it is no longer like how we used to be as practitioners, as Dharma teachers and the Dharma students. It would be difficult for us to not have enough provisions. But if we were to be fettered by offerings and benefits, then we can't tune our mind onto the path of the Dharma, because we would have to deal with all kinds of distractions. On top of that, drinking, sleeping, and drowsiness without any energy to go through the day and lose the right mindfulness, those are also the obstacles that a practitioner could encounter. That is why over here Longchenpa said that one should eradicate the kinds of obstacles such as distraction, wealth, and sleep. Usually we would like to sleep a little bit longer on Sunday, and I heard the Dharma teachers could sleep for a long time on Sundays since there's no classes on Sundays. I myself, though sometimes I also want to sleep a little bit longer on Sundays, however, my body is very much accustomed to getting up early. Doesn't matter how much I want to rest a little bit longer, my mind is wide awake, therefore I would just get up. According to the Ten Wheels Sutra, the Vaipoya Ten Wheels Sutra, it states that not grasping on fame nor benefits, that is how one should give the Dharma teaching. This is also called the pure Dharma teaching. There is the difference between the pure Dharma teaching and defiled Dharma teaching. A defiled Dharma teaching refers to the Dharma teacher contemplating that if I were to give Dharma this way, is the benefactor still going to like me? Is he still going to make offering to me? So that is called the defiled Dharma teaching. At the time of turning the Dharma wheel, we need to turn the Dharma wheel in a pure way. This is crucial. According to the Langagama Sutra, it also says that not seeking for the benefits and offerings, nor for the fame. The only reason to turn the wheel of Dharma is to cultivate wisdom for sentient beings out of compassion. Every time you have the opportunity to give the Dharma teachings, you should contemplate that I have this opportunity to give the Dharma teaching. Is it going to benefit people? Is it going to benefit one person, 10 people? You should have that kind of aspiration. This is really important. Now, these are the obstacles that needs to be eradicated. The next verse talks about the actions that one should uphold. According to Mipa Rinpoche's textual outline, it has the preliminary, the actual practice, and then the post-practice. So over here it says that one should set the cushions and thrones, also make the offerings as well as mandalas, so that the teacher would sit on the throne and give teaching seated cross-legged. In Larungar, we listen and give teachings of Dharma every day. Some have listened to my teaching for 10 years, 20 years, and some probably for 30 years. And I completely understand if you got tired of my teaching. Some of the Dharma teachers over here, as I heard yesterday, that they said they've been here for 20 years by next year, and they made a deal saying that they're going to celebrate through having hot pot together. Staying here for 20 years and giving Dharma teachings for 20 years, that is something that is worthy to be celebrated about. When it comes to Dharma teachings, we're quite familiar. So for the Dharma teachers, at the time of teaching, there is the preliminary practice and the actual practice of teaching, as well as the post-practice of teaching, of Dharma teaching. What is the preliminary of the Dharma teaching then? It is that the listeners, the audience would get together and first to set up the place, the proper place to give the Dharma teaching and receive the Dharma teaching, and then to serve a Dharma throne or the cushions as well, and then make the offerings with flowers, with the canopy and all kinds of offerings such as a mandala offering and other things. There are all kinds of offerings, the flowers, garlands, lamps. But in terms of lamps, though we understand that there is such great merit comes with making offering of lamps, and I truly enjoyed it since I was really young. But because of the special situations in Laronggar, sometimes I would get quite worried because there could be a potential fire hazard, and we did had those problems in the past. For that reason, we have to stop making lamp offering. Today, I found a very small lamp offering in my house, and I asked people to send this lamp offering, the lamp I have, to the collective lamp offering place in Laronggar. In the past, we should have those lamps. And we did have those. However, in the future, I think we can make offering with those lamp-shaped lights, electronic lights, so that our shrine halls can look quite dignified. Nowadays, we have all kinds of products that's been designed. But I think those designs, if we were to apply those talents onto drinks and food and all of those things that's not relevant, is not as meaningful as using your creativity to design the lamps that we can use to make offerings. And it would be best to use the electronic ones so that it is not of a potential fire hazard. Normally, at the time of making 7-branch offering, we should set up things including the butter lamp. However, since we have mouse here, and then they would run over those butter lamps, and then at the time of knocking those butter lamps off, the fire could easily get started, and then maybe the shrine hall could get lit and get on fire as well. So let's just practice the offering through our visualization, also provide some lamps over here as a representation. In public places such as our shrine hall, if we were to have the real butter lamps and fires, then it could lead to fire hazard or even a great fire. I remember that just a few days ago from the news in Hunan province, that's southern part of China, a high-riser that's about a few dozens of levels caught on fire and just disappeared in a very short period of time. So we should pay attention and be extremely careful with the protection of both ourselves as well as our whole Sangha. At the time of making butter lamp offering, at the time of using stoves, electronic devices, then we have to be very careful with those. If we can change our habits in using them, then we can definitely better protect each one of us. Now we have already the regulation of prohibiting the fire and the lamps, then I think it is not necessary for you to have to make lamp offerings. We can change our habits and follow the rules of the whole Sangha, which would be meritorious. The management over here sometimes could cause problems to the others. Just a few days ago, we had a meeting, and when others reported to me about what happened, I was quite ashamed of my incapability of management, which led to some negative influence to the Sangha as well as to the institute. So we all have to pay attention to our own behavior. Now we're talking about for the Dharma teacher should be sitting on the throne, should sit cross-legged at the time of giving Dharma teaching to the others. This is the tradition that's been passed down. Also, we need to make all kinds of offerings that would be very meritorious. According to the Sutra of Right Mindfulness, it says that if one were to make offering to the Dharma teacher that is teaching at the time, this person is making offering to the Buddha, because according to the Sutrayanas, the Sutra of Right Mindfulness, this is an example to present that there is such a tradition of viewing the teacher just as the Buddha. It is said that at the time of giving Dharma teaching, the Dharma teacher would visualize the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas would dissolve into him or herself. So at that time, if you were to make offering to this Dharma teacher, then the merit is quite great. Instead of that, you shouldn't think that, oh, this Dharma teacher kept on talking on and is so irritating. It is probably better for me to just hide behind the pillar sitting over there. Don't think in such a way, because at the time the Dharma teacher is giving teaching, he or her self is visualizing themselves as the true Buddha and Bodhisattvas of Sutrayana or the Vajrayana Buddha. So it's better for you not to use such a way to look at the Dharma teacher. You should rather look at the Dharma teacher as the true Buddha. At the time of studying the words of my perfect teacher, we also learned how to visualize the 5 perfect conditions of listening to the Dharma. I think you should understand that already. Now let's look at during the actual Dharma teaching. There are 2 aspects. One is the perfection of intention, and the other one is the perfection of preliminary practices. Over here, it says that the Dharma teacher should make the aspiration to give Dharma teachings in the experience of generation and completion stage. The Sambhogakaya should be visualized as a Shakyamuni, the King Shakyamuni, and then the Sambhogakaya is the 5 classes of Vajradhara. The Dharmakaya is just as a space, or the Tathagata, Samadabhadra, and Prajna Paramita, or at the times to visualize as the fundamental teacher of each of the Dharma teachings. At the time of giving Dharma teachings, I think the Dharma teachers need to be aware not to be too negative. Don't claim to be that, oh, I have so much suffering and so much afflictions, and I am not worthy to be giving teachings as such a lowly person. Rather, at the time of giving the Dharma teaching, you should be abiding in the insight and experience meditative absorption of the generation and completion stage. You should be more confident as when the Westerners give speeches. You should try your best to extend the powers that you have to give the Dharma teachings. While sitting cross-legged in your mind, you should make the aspiration, thinking that today I am going to give the Dharma teaching to the sentient beings. Today I'm going to open the Dharma eye of the sentient beings. Today I'm going to lit the bright lamp for the future, so that the wish-fulfilling jewel that is the Dharma can forever abiding in this world. That is why I'm going to give the supreme teaching to the sentient beings and the supreme oral transmissions to the sentient beings, because they will gain great benefit from it. You need to generate this kind of pride, this confidence, this richness, and then use the energetic language and use a great sense of energy to give the Dharma teachings, to bestow the Dharma teachings to the sentient beings. Though that sometimes sometimes you have all kinds of afflictions that happens to you, and sometimes maybe illness, but those are just temporary. Those would happen only for a very short period of time. So majority of the time, you should only focus on the positive and energetic and with great faith as well as confidence. At the time of giving the Dharma teaching, what should you visualize then? First of all, you need to visualize the Nirmanakaya body, which is the Tripitakas. You can visualize yourself as the fundamental teacher, that is the Shakyamuni Buddha. Especially at the time of giving Dharma teachings according to the Sutrayana tradition, usually the teachers would visualize themselves as the Shakyamuni Buddha, and they would even wear the lotus crown in certain areas in China, in mainland area. And according to the Vajrayana teachings, such as empowerments, we would wear the lotus hats. There are certain significance to these kinds of rituals. Now, when we're giving teachings of the Dharma that is associated to the Sambhogakaya body, which is the outer Tantra and the inner Tantra, as well as the Yoga Tantra. At the time of giving those kinds of teachings, you can visualize yourself as the Vajradhara. At the time of giving Dharma teachings that is on the level of Dharmakaya level, which refers to the Mahaati and the Great Emptiness Dharma teachings, then you should visualize yourself as Samadhabhadra and or Samadhabhadra and Samadhabhadri in union, or instead of Samadhabhadra, you can visualize yourself as Prajnaparamita. They're simply just different names, meaning at the time of manifesting out of emptiness, those are the forms of the Mother Buddha. At the time of giving the teachings of Mahaati, then you can either visualize the single Samadhabhadra or the Samadhabhadra and Samadhabhadri in union. At the times of giving Dharma teachings on emptiness, such as Prajnaparamita, such as Madhyamika, then you can visualize yourself as the ochre-colored Prajnaparamita. As you know, it is of ochre color and holding this Dharma teaching mudra. Or another way is that at the time of giving different Dharma teachings that's associated to different deities, for example, if I were to give teachings on Avalokiteshvara, then I would visualize myself as Avalokiteshvara, or Manjushri, then visualize as Manjushri. Or Akshobhya, that was the Akshobhya mantra I just recited, and the Great Compassion mantra. The Chinese version of the Great Compassion mantra is very similar to the Tibetans' chanting, because that was the mantra that got popular during the Tang Dynasty in China mainland. The Great Compassion mantra has been placed into their morning and evening chantings. The mantra is just a little bit different than the Tibetan one. The majority of it is the same. For example, at the time of giving teachings on the merit of a great compassion mantra, then you should visualize yourself as the 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes of Avalokiteshvara. Similarly, at the times of giving the teaching on Yamantaka, I would visualize myself as Yamantaka, or at the times of giving teachings on Hayagriva, then I would visualize myself as Hayagriva. Yesterday, I should have visualized myself as Vajravarahi, because I was giving the Simhavaktra, because I was giving you the oral transmission of the sadhana. Visualize is easy to talk about, but to truly practice it, it is a bit difficult. Mipa Rinpoche composed a text on what to visualize and how to visualize during the time of teaching and during the time of listening. And later, I'll see if we have time. It would be essential for us to study it as well. Now, at the time of giving the Dharma teaching, according to the Lotus Sutra, it says that let it be for the one that gives the teaching or listening to the Dharma teaching, it is essential not to have the mind of tiresome. Do not get bored and tired during the time of listening. It is also stated in the Kusala Mula Sutra, where it says that in order to seek for the Dharma, one should not get bored and tired, and in order to benefit the sentient beings, one should not get tired at the time of giving the Dharma teachings. This is really important. We need to remember that we are here to seek for the Dharma teachings to liberate the sentient beings, so we should not get tiresome. Also, for those of you who give Dharma teachings, in order to benefit sentient beings, we shouldn't get tired of it either. But I think majority of you are doing quite well without any complaints. Many of the Dharma teachers had been teaching for many, many years. The next one talks about at the time of giving Dharma teaching, you should not make mistakes in the words, in the meaning of the correct Dharma. It would be the best for you not to make mistakes. You have to prepare very carefully for the class. Also, be very careful and very focused at the time of giving the teaching. As the audience, you should listen with great attentiveness as well. At that time, you should visualize that I am currently giving teachings, but my voice of the Dharma teaching has now transformed into the 60 types of the melodious sounds that has pervaded over the whole world. Especially nowadays, we have the methods of using internet. At the time of listening to the Dharma, you should also be attentive. Do not eat at the same time as listening. Maybe after I address that, you will stop chewing right away. I'm simply joking because nobody would eat and listen to Dharma, right? The next thing to pay attention to is make sure that the meaning is very clear. At the same time, to make sure that the sound would follow the interest and the faith of the audience. Throughout the Dharma teaching, you should not use the words of affliction, nor words that's not clear, nor words that's conflicting to each other. Rather, you should be respectful and joyful at the time of giving Dharma teaching. At the time of giving Dharma teaching, we should avoid being sarcastic and talking about other people's faults. I myself, I tend to do that, but sometimes I do that because I wanted to eventually bring benefits to you. However, that being said, the Dharma teaching should still be rather quite pleasant to the ears and clear to the ears, and the meaning should be very clearly stated. So when other people listen to the Dharma teaching, they would be very joyful as well. And there are different methods of giving teachings. Over here it talks about using various kinds of metaphors and intriguing stories, quotations from various sutras, as well as using all kinds of analytical inference. Use all kinds of ways to resolve the questions and doubts that may inhabit in the audience mind, and then make analysis and then give them answers, so that after each class, the audience would be able to resolve lots of questions from their mind and then eventually be able to understand without any problems. One should contemplate in such a way the voice of Dharma would be all pervasive over the whole world, and each of the sentient beings that listens to this Dharma, their ignorance would slowly be dispersed, and the Dharma would be infused into their mind stream. This is really important to visualize, because at the times of giving some Dharma teachings, let it be the Sutrayana teachings or others, even for one class, that could be of great benefits. The other day when we talked about Phuntsok Rinpoche's teachings, though he relied on his teacher for a very short short period of time, but he received such great benefits from his teacher. Sometimes at the time of listening to the Dharma, if we only listen to 1 or 2 classes from certain teachers, that benefit could be everlasting, such as the old Khenpo in our monastery, Khenpo Lakshek. He listened to some classes from the Lama Iko, and his memory of those classes are still so fresh as if those only happened yesterday, because those classes really transform his whole life. At the time of listening to the Dharma teachings, we should not have any tiresome mindset. Rather, we should be very diligent. It is said that if you were to truly understand the Dharma's teaching, the one that gives you this Dharma teaching is truly the Nirmanakaya of the Buddha. So you should visualize your teacher in such a way. And the teacher that gives the Dharma teaching should visualize yourselves in such a way. You're simply carrying out the activities of the Buddha. You should not contemplate that I am so inferior, I have lots of afflictions, I am full of suffering. Some of the Dharma teachers are rather lack of self-confidence and low in self-esteem. It is not necessary to do that, really. Today, our class will be a little bit longer because I want to finish this particular chapter. Over here, it talks about the intention should be perfected, and then perfect the preliminaries as well. Then in the verse it says that the 6 paramitas of teaching the Dharma comes as follows. Skillfully expounding the meaning of words is the generosity of Dharma. Explanation without confusion is precepts. Tolerance of tiresomeness, delight in diligence without distraction is meditation, and wisdom of discernment. Over here it talks about the preliminary practice of giving the Dharma teaching within one particular class. The 6 paramitas can be all perfected in such a way you don't need to give generosity practices elsewhere, nor to abide in meditation to practice the 6 paramitas. You can perfect everything within one class. At that time, when the Dharma teacher is giving the Dharma teaching, he or she could give the teaching in such a pure and refined way, and this would be called as a perfection. During the time of giving the Dharma teaching, if one do not mix the Dharma teaching with afflictions nor with the suffering, this is called the Shila, the precept paramita. And then at the time of listening or giving teaching of the Dharma, you can endure all kinds of suffering, such as tiresomeness, such as hunger and thirst and hotness and coldness, and are not afraid of rain or snow or vicious dogs or bandits. This is called the tolerance or the patience paramita. And then take delights in diligence. At the time of giving Dharma teachings, one should be quite joyful of giving the teachings of the virtue. When you get used to giving Dharma teachings, you won't feel quite tired anymore. You would rather quite enjoy giving the teaching. So this taking delight of giving Dharma teaching is called diligence. And then during the time of giving Dharma teaching, if one can maintain undistracted, wholeheartedly giving teaching, this is called meditation paramita. And then at the time of giving Dharma teachings, not being dissuaded by the other distractions, and still being able to discern with what to take and what to abandon, this is called the paramita of wisdom. So within one class, one would be able to perfect all the 6 paramitas. According to the Great Heap Sutra, it also says that the bliss and happiness of the 3 existence, if one were to be generous and offer others with all of that happiness to the others, such kind of merit is still not comparable to giving the Dharma offering of even one particular verse. if you can give a Dharma teaching of one verse, now let's contemplate that each evening after the time of class, you would explain Dharma to your fellow group members and to the ones that makes presentations. At that time, you would generate great numbers of merit that far surpass the money could compare. So when it is your turn to give the Dharma presentation, you should not make the supplication quietly, thinking that please don't ask me. This is really not good. Whenever you have the opportunity to give the Dharma teachings, then you should consider this is the blessings from the deity, and this is the opportunity for you to generate great merit. Within this lifetime, I still have the opportunity to give the Dharma teachings. We should be quite fortunate. So any of you who's not got that opportunity, you can have that opportunity today. Now let's look at the final and conclusion. Which is making the dedication of merit. Over here it says that one should then rededicate the merit to benefit the sentient beings as well as being grateful. To the great kindness of the teachers, as well as being respectful to the wondrous Dharma. So we can make dedications with the previous two verses that Khenpo chanted over there, or with the usual rededication of merit. This particular rededication of merit verses will be and should be led by the teacher. Mainly it is for the teacher to rededicate the merit, and then for the ones that are the audience, then there's the description of dedication of merit at the end of the 11th chapter. At the time of rededicate merit, the teacher should consider that today my virtuous roots and merits are gathered from the source of my spiritual teacher. For such reason, I should be grateful to my Guru, and because of this Dharma sourced from the Buddha, so I should be grateful to the Buddha. Also, because of the Dharma protector, the Dakinis, as well as the deity protected me, so that my Dharma teaching had successfully succeeded. For such reason, I should be grateful to the three roots. Also, if I have never encountered the correct Dharma, then I would not have such opportunity. So may the Dharma be everlasting in this world. On top of that, in order to give the Dharma teachings with this body, I need to be grateful to my parents, without whom I would not be able to have the opportunity to give the Dharma teachings. So one should rededicate the merit with such kind of heartfelt gratefulness to all of those. And then the merits that's associated to giving the Dharma teachings and rededicating the merit is as follows. The merit would lead to samadhi, would lead to parting from confusion and discernment, as well as the eloquence would lead to upholding the treasure of Dharma and listening to the Dharma teachings. The celestial beings would praise as well as help you to fulfill all your wishes. It also would lead to the lifetimes of opportunities to study the wonderful Dharma, which would help one to become the Sugata and then bestow the ring of Dharma. So over here it talks about the various kinds of great merit, such as the great mindfulness, the right mindfulness, eloquence, also eradication of afflictions, and endowed with the Dharma treasure without exhaustion, as well as listening to the Dharma teachings in front of the Buddha, receive all kinds of praises from the celestial beings and all sentient beings, all the wishes can be fulfilled, whatever you wish for can be fulfilled. On top of that, and more importantly, the Dharma teachings could lead to, if we were to give Dharma teachings or listening to the Dharma, then our lifetimes would be not parting from the correct Dharma, and for lifetimes we will not part from our virtuous spiritual teacher. In a very swift time, we can attain the perfect Sugatahood or the Buddhahood, and then in the future times, in different worlds, we would be able to give the Dharma teachings to different sentient beings following their different dispositions. That's the kinds of merits and benefits associated with listening and giving the Dharma teachings. These have been talked about extensively in Making the Aspiration Sutra and in the Samadhi Sutra. There are the 10 types of merits associated with giving the Dharma teaching, that is, eradicate all kinds of vice and practice all virtue, to abide in the state of true Dharma, and to attain the purity in Pure Land, to attain the fruition of Bodhi, as well as working the ability to eradicate afflictions and practice generosity of sharing the Dharma to all sentient beings, so on and so forth. According to the Lotus Sutra, it also talks about that the one that takes delight in giving the Dharma teachings would not have worries. The one as such would be protected and thought about by all the Buddhas, and would be able to bring happiness to the great assembly. So, for those of you who are staying here, you take delight in giving Dharma teachings and do not have lots of worrisome and grasping mind. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, as well as the virtuous spirits, are constantly protecting you. You're making other people happy and delighted. This is really the best kinds of joy you can receive in this monastery. I think if you can give Dharma teachings happily, if you can listen to the Dharma teachings happily, then we're truly enjoying the inexhaustible amritas from the celestial beings. And maybe that's why many people want to stay here and do not want to leave. It is not because they can receive fame or wealth or all kinds of entertainment. It is rather because over here you can receive all kinds of blessings from the Guru and from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Also, it provides us the opportunity to enjoy the Dharma for lifetimes. That is why we like to stay here. Now, the Dharma teachers must feel quite delighted and honored to share the Dharma teachings to all of you, and we have completed the 11th chapter.